Welcome to Beacon of Creation, a weekly podcast on game design through the lens of Magic the Gathering. I'm Tim.
And I'm Peter.
With Tarkir Dragonstorm, we have 5 mechanics, actually 6 mechanics, and we don't necessarily want to crowd out the entire set with just understanding those mechanics. And so instead, we've got one per clan, and most of those are just based off of previous mechanics. We've got Scavenge as an old mechanic is now Renew. We have Flashback is now Harmonize. Fabricate is now Endure. These are all mechanics that are very close to existing Magic mechanics, historical mechanics. It still executes on the vibe of, hey, we've got a bunch of factions all with their own identity, but without going super deep on, having to innovate super hard on all those clans. And I found that really inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
So I issued the challenge to the Discord, which is to just soup up a bunch of keywords, take an existing keyword, give us a new version, give us a card that would use that, give us a couple sentences about it. And that's what we're going to be going through today.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun to look back at some old mechanics and see where the holes are with new Magic design, right?
Yeah.
Magic design has changed a lot since a lot of these mechanics were around. The best example is Scavenge used to just put +1/+1 counters on it. Since then, we've introduced keyword counters, and now Renew can utilize those keyword counters in some way.
Yeah. All right, so we've got 10, 12 mechanics that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to hit one per person who submitted, and then we're going to come back and you actually submitted a ton yourself, Peter. So we're going to lightning round those at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Our first one was from Cord. They are starting with the mechanic Evolve and introducing a new mechanic, Biomimic. But before we dive into Biomimic, I'm just going to give you a sample card, and we'll break down an existing Evolve card so we have a sense of how these are. And one of the existing cards is called Cloudfin Raptor. This is a 1-mana 0/1 flying creature. It's a bird mutant, and it has Evolve. Whenever a creature you control enters, that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. If I've got this Cloudfin Raptor and I play a new creature, it's a 2/2. Is 2 higher than 0 or 1? It is? Okay, the Raptor gets a counter. If I play an 08, an 08 is bigger in one way, and that's good enough to trigger an Evolve. These Evolve creatures, they start a little bit small, and as long as you keep curving out and you have a couple either big creatures or lopsided creatures, you're going to have a cool deck.
Cord's evolution on Evolve was Biomimic. Biomimic's reminder text is, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has Death Touch, Reach, Trample, Vigilance, or greater size, put a counter of that type on this creature. I think the or greater size implies that you put a +1/+1 counter on it. That way it's purely Evolve with keywords. Kind of doing the Renew thing.
Yeah. Actually, you brought up Renew, and this is kind of the Renew, but for Evolve.
Mm-hmm. We have 2 cards that Cord gave us. One of them's a vanilla here. Well, French vanilla. Combine Larva, a green for a 0/1 mutant pest with Biomimic. And then Larval Host, 3 black for a 3/3. It has Biomimic, and when this creature dies, create a 0/0 green pest creature token with the same counters this creature had on it when it died. Combine Larva is basically your Cloudfin Raptor, but it has to gain the cool keywords to go with it.
Yeah, so I guess Biomimic is saying, hey, Biomimic is enough better than Evolve that you don't get a starting keyword.
Mm-hmm.
The abilities you can get are Death Touch, Reach, Trample, or Vigilance.
Signaling it's probably specifically a green-black ability in Cord's mind, maybe?
Yeah, that seems like the overlap we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other ones might be seen as stronger. Like Lifelink and Flying, I think, are probably roughly better than most of these other mechanics. So we're not trying to let you make a giant Lifelink force.
The one that stands out to me here is Death Touch. Death Touch is like a common keyword, but I think in the set skeleton you have one Death Toucher in the set usually, like a 2-mana Death Toucher. Usually that card's pretty okay, as it kind of gums up the ground a little bit, helps out the slower decks. And suddenly this having the potential to create 2 Death Touchers kind of is something that I might flag. If you have 2 Reachers, 2 creatures with Trample, 2 creatures with Vigilance, that's not drastically changing the board state, but it is changing the way the creature plays. 2 creatures with Death Touch is drastically changing the combat math for your opponent, right?
Yeah.
2 of my creatures are going to die if I attack, or across 2 attacks, I'm going to lose 2 creatures. Though you do get the cool Death Touch Trample synergy.
Yeah, Death Touch Trample. Death Touch Vigilance is pretty nice too, because it's saying like, hey, I might only be a 2/2, but I'm going to attack every turn until you trade. Cord also sent along, the ability is centered around the flavor of the Simic with a heavier lean on green keywords to match the Simic Guild's changes after the death of Zagana. Maybe this wouldn't be fully a guild set. We've got a Ravnica that's like shattered in some way. We've got a black creature here, which would not be Simic. So maybe some of the pitch here is that we've got a bunch of these creatures that are science experiments let loose, that are bio experiments let loose, and they're evolving in cool new ways.
Yeah. I like the tech here. It's doing that thing we kind of described in the beginning of, hey, this is an existing mechanic. We can make it a little bit cooler by using some new tech that's been introduced to Magic the Gathering. And I think it does a good flavor job of like, oh, my creatures are learning, gaining new abilities, very, very Simic-y, captures evolve really well. So I think the flavor here is a hit for me.
Yeah. If Combine Larva is correctly balanced, I don't know if it is or not. I have to have a significantly smaller starting creature in order to get Biomimic. And therefore, I kind of need it to pay off. I kind of need to have like a pretty significant mix of these keywords in order for it to be worth it. Like green could maybe, if it needed to, get like a 1-mana 2/1 or at least a 1/2 common. With a keyword, if the keyword is like too expensive for how enableable, how usable it is, that could maybe hurt it. But it kind of remains to be seen. If you were going to take this keyword and run with it, you'd have to do all that testing. The reminder text is also maybe the other limiter on this card, because maybe you say, oh, I want to have a couple other abilities on there. You're already at 5 lines of reminder text and you have to go a little deeper. But in terms of something that like you just have in a deck and then you accidentally get value out of, seems pretty high. You don't have to build around it that hard. It also rewards you for building around it.
The next keyword was submitted by VT Basemat. This is a play on Eminence, which was introduced in Commander 2013. Our example here is the Dragon. For Wooburg, for a 10/10 legendary creature, has Eminence as long as the Dragon is in the command zone or on the battlefield. Other dragon spells you cost 1 less to cast. It's got flying, and then whenever you attack with one or more dragons, you draw that many cards and put a permanent from the battlefield. But all of the commanders with Eminence basically did something from the battlefield. I think Edgar Markov made a vampire. There was a cat that made your stuff big.
Oloro gained you life every turn.
VT Basemat is suggesting the new mechanic Distinction. If card name is on the battlefield or in the command zone after returning from the battlefield since the beginning of your last turn, do an effect. So it's isolating this if the card name's on the battlefield or in the command zone after returning from the battlefield since the beginning of your last turn. The card here is the Dragon Who Showed Up, 2 and Wooburg for 10, legendary creature, dragon avatar. It has Distinction. As long as the Dragon is on the battlefield or is in the command zone after returning from the battlefield since the beginning of your last turn, other dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast.
Oh, this is the same card, but
yeah, whenever you attack, blah,
Distinction.
blah, blah.
Yeah.
You have to cast your commander in order for Eminence to be, activated. You don't just get to put your commander in the command zone and never cast them. Your commander has to show up and kind of inspire people, tell your followers that, hey, I'm here. I have Eminence or Distinction in this case.
Yeah. There's definitely some dislike out there for Eminence, just like spiritually, like, is this an okay thing to be doing kind of problem with it? I think that Eminence is like reasonably balanceable and not that powerful naturally. Like it's not something where if you use Eminence, it's always broken. And because of that, like just making the same thing but powered down isn't that appealing a solution to me. Because you could just design the cards differently, I guess. Like you don't need a new mechanic to do that.
Even with this specific card, the Dragon, the Eminence on the Dragon kind of just enabled the Dragon Tribal deck. I don't remember encountering that many like Dragon decks in the wild where it's like, oh, this is so unfair that their 6-drop costs 5 mana now instead. Edgar Markov was kind of the issue, and that was maybe more of a design failure than specifically Eminence.
It also adds maybe like 80 characters to the ability, which is a decent amount of space to pay on the card. Another 2 lines of text in order to have distinction over eminence. I'm coming out kind of negative. I shouldn't be doing that. I want to back up a second. VT Basebet has solved this in an interesting way. The solution, I think, is cool.
Yeah.
You can still have the ability, if your commander is killed, you still have one more kind of grace period turn with your commander's ability. This is a great solution to a problem. If you were saying like, hey, distinction is like so fair that we could put it on a million different things, that might actually move forward a bunch of commander designs that would other be frustrating. Like, if my commander's not in play, my deck doesn't do anything. This is like a super common commander problem.
Yeah.
And a very frustrating one, and one that people don't like about commander quite often, like a board wipe or whatever. I wasn't doing anything. I played my commander and the board got wiped for some other reason, and now my deck falls apart. That's like really frustrating and sad. And the solution for distinction here is quite good because it gives you one grace turn, but not forever. And also, you have to have cast your commander, so you paid for it at least once before that happened.
I think the mechanic for me that this is like fixing a little bit is Ward. Because Ward is kind of the solution to that problem right now in Commander. Oh, here's your commander. They don't have like instantaneous value, so you slap a Ward on them so that if they die, like, or it's a little harder to kill them, they won't be targeted by a removal spell.
Okay, yeah.
And this kind of does that same thing of like, hey, this doesn't have instantaneous value, but you are guaranteed to have that value next turn. And that's, like you're saying, is something that is great, especially in like a format where if you spend 5 mana on your commander and they do nothing, that's really bad. And like you spent 5 mana on a card that now costs you 7 mana and your whole deck's built around, you don't want to have that kind of feel bad, even in like very casual settings.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a feel bad that I felt because I tend to like those really like mediocre commanders. So if you give me an extra turn with that ability, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This has me kind of thinking if you can use the activate only once kind of text as like a helpful thing. And because it's in the command zone, maybe that's a unique enough space that you don't need a tracker like that. So if you had an ability that you could activate once from the command zone on your commander, would that kind of be something interesting? And then you have to cast your commander again later to get that effect again?
Maybe it's a question of whether you should have not like command zone abilities at all.
Yeah.
Sort of what you're describing is almost like cycling, but from the command zone.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have one time per game, I could pay 3 in a red to deal 5 to any target.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has appeal, or maybe it's something cheap, like it's 3 mana, draw 3 cards, discard 2 cards, or whatever. So you know, like an Omen from Dragons of Tarkir.
Low impact enough that you wouldn't build your entire deck just to have this 8th card, basically, because that's what it is. It's an 8th card in your command. Like, sorry, it'd be a 9th card in your command zone.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because the commander's already your 8th card. But also, that's kind of in the heart of commander of like, I have this extra spell that I'll always have access to.
I'm not confident what the answer is there. Is it good to even attempt any command zone abilities? Like, let's say there are 15 of these. We're putting them in like a limited set, like X-Men Future Brawl or whatever. We've got 15 X-Men cards that all have command zone Omen abilities, basically. One time per game abilities you're allowed to use. That creates enough awareness where now people think like, do I have to read this whole card? But do I have to know? Do I have to keep in mind? Let's say there's like a counter spell or a kill spell or whatever. Oh, you didn't have enough mana to cast your commander, but you did on board have a thing in the command zone that did let you murder something. Oh man, I should have paid attention to that. Now I have to pay attention to the commanders in the command zone. That feels like it could be maybe similarly undesirable to the vibe people get from Eminence.
Right.
It's safer in some way. Hey, the beef, I think the spiritual beef people have with Eminence is like, you didn't pay anything for that. You didn't cast it. If you at least have to pay something for an Eminence ability or an Omen ability, maybe you've satisfied some of those people, but you still leave a lot of the other things people grouse about with Eminence.
Mm-hmm. It was a cool mechanic to take a crack at, though. I don't think we're gonna have any more commander style mechanics, so that was a really interesting pick.
Yeah. Next up, actually, we've got yours. You want to read that one?
Yeah. So I submitted Extract, which is a variation on Spectacle.
One that I think was like exemplified what Spectacle was is Blade Juggler. This is another Ravnica mechanic that we're tackling here. But so this is a 5 mana 3/2. And it has a ETB no matter what, deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. So 5 mana 3/2 draw a card, that's like barely playable. It's kind of cool in a value way, but also a Spectacle. A Spectacle for 2 and a black. You may cast the spell for a Spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. So this is like one of the cool things about being an aggro deck is like, hey, if you are truly committed to dealing damage every turn, your spells are cheaper. And if you just want to be a Golgari deck who's just playing this black card for value, this card is still functions. You can still play a 5 mana draw card creature, but it's a lot worse. And that's like the fun gap between the regular cost and the Spectacle cost.
Mm-hmm. My recommendation for a souped up version of that is Extract. So Extract comes with a cost like Spectacle. And the reminder text says, you may cast this spell by paying its extract cost, reduced by the greatest amount of life lost by an opponent this turn. And then my note here is I picture this mechanic in a desert-style survival setting, so like a Thunder Junction or an Amonkhet, where you're trying to get value out of anything and everything and take advantage of other people to survive. Theoretically, you could just choose to pay the full extract cost every time, but in my headcanon, if you will, most of the extract costs are prohibitively higher than the default. So in our example here, we have Wily Rascal, 3 and a red for a 4/3 fox. It has Trample and Extract 5 red.
So like just barely playable as is, 4 mana, 4/3 Trample.
Mm-hmm.
And then Extract starts as 7, but I can deal up to 5 damage to get up to 5 mana off of that. So once I've dealt 4 damage, this is cheaper.
Yeah.
And if I deal 5 damage, this is like a decent, like a solid card.
Mm-hmm. I'm not totally convinced that the numbers on this specific card are right.
Sure. Yeah.
But the concept is there of like, you need to reach a certain threshold of damage. I think it would require some testing to figure out how frequently are you dealing 5 damage. The nice thing about Spectacle is that how often am I dealing damage to my opponent? Like, it's a very controllable thing. Versus how often am I dealing 1 damage versus 3 damage versus 5 damage, and how much benefit am I getting based on the change in that total amount of life is a little harder to predict, and you might need a little bit of practice to hone in on what the appropriate mana cost is.
Yeah, it seems like you need the extract cost to be higher than the regular cost.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you're also saying until you've dealt 3 or 4 or 5 damage, you don't get a benefit. In places where you have a decent chance of dealing a bunch of damage, like if we want this to like feel commander level or whatever, that could actually start to work.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 10 mana normally, I might deal 9 damage to an opponent and have the game still be in question in commander.
Yeah.
Because if I deal 9 damage to my opponent in 1-on-1 in 1 turn, we're kind of already packing it up.
Yeah. With this specific guy, there is kind of an element of this is a little bit of an enabler for Extract. It's a 4/3 with Trample.
Okay.
So
keeps the ball rolling.
Hopefully you're getting a little bit of extra damage. Yeah. So maybe you're not always casting this guy for extract cost.
Yeah.
If you have this guy down and he doesn't get blocked for some reason, then you're dealing your 4 damage. You're getting a reduced cost on your second one. So that's a little bit of the logic. When I was kind of figuring out what mechanics are good for quote unquote souping up, I was looking at the 3 examples of Renew, Harmonize, and Endure and kind of trying to figure out, okay, what do these mechanics have? And what do their original mechanics have that make this work? And like we kind of already addressed, the Renew has some element of like building off of the an existing or a new development in Magic with these keyword counters. And then I kind of looked at Harmonize as like cost reduction based off something is kind of a very easy way to just like soup up a mechanic slightly and keep it interesting. Like Harmonize is very captivating, just cost reduce. So I just started looking for mechanics where it's like, okay, where can I just do flat general cost reduction on a mechanic based off some variable? And so that's how I landed on the Spectacle Extract. Maybe this is even more interesting if it's like dealing damage to anything. So like, oh, if I can just deal 5 damage across all permanents this turn, that's more achievable than just losing life.
Yeah. Okay. If we can lock in a number, I think that makes it easier to design cards. Like if sources you control dealt 5 or more damage this turn.
Yeah.
Now it's like a really direct link to Spectacle. Like what's bigger than Spectacle? Like Masterpiece or something. Like Showstopper. And now it's like, okay, I got to build. I know I'm doing a Rakdos thing, but I'm doing a somewhat different Rakdos thing than last time. That is still kind of exciting. Can I get to 5? Well, a couple pump spells and I'm there. Just attacking with a swarm of guys and I'm there. If I'm not attacking at all, I'm not doing it. So the Golgari deck or whatever can't steal this card.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the evolution on this extract idea, is the dealing a set amount of damage to get a bigger discount or a set discount. And you can deal it across any kind of permanent. Something that makes Harmonize work is that like creature power is something that's very easy to control. Of like, you know how frequently somebody's getting a 6/6 on the board. You know how much work they had to put in to get that 6/6 on the board. And so that's something to think about when designing these mechanics, is like, how easy is it for me to flag the frequency at which people are going to be doing this to achieve it?
Yeah. All right. Next up, we've got one from Kuyashi Plays, and that is a twist on Persist and Undying called Shallow Grave. Persist and Undying are kind of the same, but it's 2 sides of the same mechanic. I'll read us an Undying card, and then we'll just talk about Persist real quick. One pretty famous card is Strangleroot Geist. This is green, 2 mana for a 2/1 haste with Undying. When this creature dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So this jumps out on turn 2, hits for 2, trades off eventually, gets eaten, and then comes back as a 3/2 haste. So it's even nice and compatible with like you sacrificing it on your turn and then still attacking with it, or all kinds of other stuff like that. The good Undying cards have sort of been just the ones that are the most engine-y. Like Young Wolf, I think, is probably the most played Undying card. It's just a 1 mana 1/1 with Undying. Just the one that gets to come back one time and has counter synergy. Persist is the same mechanic, but with -1/-1 counter, so you come back smaller. So obviously, Undying is kind of expensive as an ability. Persist a little cheaper, but they both get you 2 uses of your creature.
One of the problems that you run into dealing with Persistent Undying is that they're exploitable. Persist specifically, like, it's kind of easy to get rid of the -1/-1 counter.
Yeah.
So then you get this recursive element that becomes a little bit of a problem and leads to these kind of combos that can be stronger than intended.
Yeah, there's a variety of ways to assemble the combo of a persist creature, a way to sacrifice creatures, and something that says creatures you control enter with a +1/+1 counter on it, in addition to its baseline power. So what did Kuyashi give us?
Kuyashi gave us Shallow Grave. I'm just going to read the creature here. Necrosaurus Raptor is 3 black for a 3/4 zombie dinosaur with menace and Shallow Grave. When this creature dies, if it had no decayed counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a decayed counter on it. It can't block. When it attacks, sacrifice it at the end of combat.
Okay, so instead of getting +1/+1 or -1/-1, I'd come back decayed. Decayed, I can't block, and the next time I attack, I die. This feels like a decent fix. This feels like a solution to a problem. I'm pretty impressed by this one. Kuyashi also mentions here that Persist also has a problem where it needs an environment that has -1/-1 counters, which are basically no environments these days. Like 1 set out of 10, 1 set out of 20. And then Undying itself is just like such a valuable ability that's hard to put on cards. Is this decayed creature worse than coming back with a -1/-1 counter? Often, yeah. You'd rather have a -1/-1 counter on it because it could still block then. But is there still a lot of power in this Shallow Grave creature? I would say yes. I would you still look at this card and say, I get an attack for 3 a couple times with Menace. Oh, they trade away for it. I get 1 more attack for 3. And my creature's ability mattered.
Yeah. You can put an enters the battlefield trigger on this still.
Yeah.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
It's also a little bit harder to take advantage of the, get rid of the Shallow Grave counter because it's not as easy as just getting a +1/+1 counter on it, which is a nice little side benefit. It doesn't completely remove the little Johnny element of it, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
And then Decayed is just like, Decayed might be one of my personal favorite innovations as far as just like gumming up the board is not something that you necessarily want to constantly encourage in your limited environments. One thing that does that is tokens. One way to prevent that is Decayed. And just saying this thing can't block is so great. Such a good line of text. Let me attack. I don't want to worry about your blockers.
Yeah, it's hard to have many cards in a set that just can't block on their own. Like that's just not normal Magic gameplay. But things that are scattered around that can't block, like rat tokens, often can't block. Like that can still contribute a lot to an environment. And you can still do the Young Wolf thing of printing cards that you could sacrifice multiple times. 2 bodies for 1 card. Yeah, great submission.
Next is from Pat. They made a variation on Squad. Pat.
Yeah, Pat. The episode Pat came on was talking about Squad, so this is on brand.
They said this is the Endure to Squad's Fabricate because it can be used in places other than entering the battlefield.
Okay, so Squad. This was basically just a commander-only mechanic so far.
I have a simple Squad card I can read here.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Ultramarines Honor Guard. 3 white for a 2/2 with Squad 2. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may pay 2 colorless any number of times. When this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it, and that has the ability other creatures you control get +1/+1. So 4 mana for a 2/2 that anthems your creatures. 6 mana, you get 2 of those bodies. 8 mana, you get 3 of those bodies, etc.
Yeah, this is like kind of an appealing thing to do with a lot of mana. I would say that like Squad was weirdly underserved by the environment that it was created for. A lot of these Squad cards have struggled to show up in Commander. Even though they're really evocative, they fit like I have 10 of the same unit, which is crucial to Warhammer flavor. I haven't really seen people play them. So I guess we'll hear about Pat's version.
Yeah, so Pat's version is duplicate this. And they gave us 2 examples of the card. I'll read the first one here is Swarming Squadron. It's a star 1 human soldier. This creature's power is equal to the number of soldiers you control. And it has white, duplicate this. So it's a 1 mana 1/1. And you can pay 2 mana, 2 white mana, to create another version of that. And then you get a 2/2. You get 2 2/2s, and then that keeps going. That's a rare, and they gave us another example as well. This is an artifact equipment for 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. As long as it's your turn, equipped creature has first strike. It has equip 1 and 4 mana. Duplicate this.
This is kind of in the range of like a Monstrous or Exhaust, where it's an ability you get to do once. Here, you're getting an extra copy of a thing. That copy can't make additional copies because kind of crucial to this duplicate thing is that it loses the duplicate ability.
The original doesn't lose the duplicate ability, right?
Oh, is that true?
But that could be the intention of Pat could be that it because I like the idea of duplicate only happens once, and it was going to be one of my notes of like, I think if this is only happening one time, these cards are like home runs of just like, bam, now I have 2 of this equipment. That's sick.
Yeah, I didn't understand that at first. So yeah, the Swarming Squadron is this 1 power soldier. Its power is the number of soldiers you control. You can hit the duplicate button. You'll make a second one, so now they're both 2/1s. If you have mana, you can just keep hammering that button.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit...
Makes it tough to balance this card, I think.
Yeah. In Commander, this card, kind of goes crazy. They're always X1s, so it's not too oppressive, but just 2 mana to make a creature as an activation.
This is kind of like a, I don't know, in some ways like a leg up on like a reassembling skeleton or something, where I could just create an extra one every turn to block with.
Now you're talking. Duplicate this from the graveyard on a skeleton. Okay, you know
Huh.
what? I'm in.
Yeah, interesting. I guess the thing that I would see this is the most powerful is like turn 6 in a limited game or something. If
Yeah.
my opponent has this, I'm like so sad because they're going to make 3 soldiers a turn for the rest of the game. It's limited by your white mana, so maybe it's 2 soldiers a turn, but whew, that's tough.
Yeah, I think the equipment is actually the most like engaging to me of like, whatever kind of equipment is getting the second piece of material, enough to make this meh equipment into something that maybe I want to play.
Yeah.
It makes me at least intrigued. It's something kind of exciting to add on to an equipment, at the very minimum. I don't know if it turns it into playable, but it definitely turns it into interesting, where otherwise this card would be pretty boring.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of fun because now you have ways of getting multiple equipment in play without
Yep.
having to like have a million in your deck. I guess Pet's also going for like a real neutral flavor on this, like super reusable. Because if you're using a word like duplicate, that's like one of the top 3 words you use for copy. If you have a word that's like kind of generic or high up on like synonyms for like a common action, it makes it harder to learn the like specific rules around it. Where like, because this is a generic word, that doesn't flag you that there are extra things about it besides like loses this ability and isn't legendary. Like that you don't naturally know that from the term duplicate.
The way I would expect duplicate, like if I saw just like white duplicate this,
Yeah.
it would lead me to believe that duplicate is like a word that Magic is using to like refer to clones and copies now. And so like it's fundamentally kind of changing the syntax of Magic.
Yeah.
That would be my expectation from seeing this type of
It's a
card.
good read. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if these cards are indicating that, but using the term duplicate this is what is indicating that to me. And like then I would expect to see like whenever you cast this spell, duplicate it in the future. And then duplicate would have maybe all this rules baggage attached to it somehow.
I guess from a game design point of view, if you or I were talking about a card that made copies, some things we would consider were removing the ability for the copy to make copies and to make it not legendary. Those are things that we'd consider doing anyhow. So Pat is maybe saying like, hey, this is a card for other designers or other people who know the Magic rules. Like, what are some common things you would bake into the duplicate functionality or to copy functionality in Magic?
I also think there's a real possibility that Pat was submitting this an hour before going to work or driving to class or whatever, and was like, I think I like this idea. I don't have a good word for it, so I'm just going to slap duplicate.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think that's a possibility.
It's kind of a funny situation where like making it less generic and making it like, hey, here's a specific place we want to have this ability, wild animal world where all the animals are making copies of each other. I guess kind of like Bloomburrow.
Yeah.
Actually, compared to Offspring, that's funny. Because Offspring is like the powered down squad,
Yep.
right? You get to make exactly one copy and it's a baby copy. Duplicate is like make as many babies as you want.
How did you feel about Offspring from Bloomburrow? Like, as far as like Squad has not seen a lot of play, it's
Yeah.
only really a Commander product. We saw the kind of premiere set limited version of it in Offspring. Offspring, I felt like was really fun to play. There's a couple constructed cards that are floating around. I
Yeah.
can think of that 4-mana rabbit.
Almost all the Offspring cards were successful in Limited. I've seen a couple of them in Commander get played. Yeah.
Offspring's cool.
I've definitely seen more Offspring than Squad in play. All right. Our next one is from Il Diavolo Vestarosa. This is taking Haunt,
Classic.
famously maligned mechanic, and making Departure. Haunt was one of the things that we spent a lot of time trying to do in Castmire, I remember. And we really desperately wanted to redeem Haunt and failed.
Yeah, Haunt forever in the wheelhouse of like a great magic word wasted.
Yeah. But Departure, hey, this is kind of cool sounding card still.
Yeah,
Let me
for
get a
sure.
Haunt card first before we move on. Haunt is one of those mechanics that like is kind of a different mechanic when it's on a spell versus on a creature. Yeah, Blind Hunter is 2 black-white, 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer with Haunt. When this creature dies, exile it haunting target creature. Haunt by itself does nothing. When Blind Hunter enters the battlefield or the creature it haunts dies, target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. You know what? I just had a weird reaction reading this card. I remember back in the day, the word on the street was that Haunt is like blindingly confusing. And maybe it's just because I've played a lot of Magic since then. Haunt no longer seems that confusing.
Well, so they've changed the text that is required for it dramatically, and I think that has helped it so much.
Oh, you want me to go original printing style?
The original printing, like Haunt, looks so functional now compared to the original Haunt cards.
Oh. So the original Guild Pack printing, when this card is put into a graveyard from play, remove it from the game, haunting target creature. So put into a graveyard from play is now dies, and remove it from the game is now exile. So the reminder text for Haunt chopped in half.
Do we attach cards to things more often now? Like,
yeah, this is not like more complex than Mutate.
Exactly.
Mutate is more functional, but it's Mutate is certainly more complex than Haunt. But yeah,
we're ready. Bring back Haunt unchanged.
Yeah, that's the upside of living forever is that you finally see a time where what you have to give the world is finally caught up with you.
Haunt has been haunting Magic for a while, and whatever creature it was haunting is about to die, and the trigger's about to go off, and Haunt's coming back.
Which maybe makes it ready for a twist. Departure. When this creature dies, exile it watching upon target creature. The watched upon creature has this creature's keywords, if any, and when this creature dies, return the exiled card to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. All right, so Departure is a little bit different, where it's not just like a state. It's like some specific things that are good, right? It's sort of like a delayed undying, delayed shallow grave or whatever. I'm a ghost or I'm an evil person. When I die, I depart into I start watching a creature. When that creature dies, I am reborn. I'm an evil demon. I'm back. My host is dead. And now I'm back. And this rules. So just having Departure on a vanilla has value. And the the reminder text is quite long. It's like card filling, but it's naturally good. Like you don't need anything else on the card. You could have 8. You could have at least 6 cards in your limited set that just have Departure or Departure and like a keyword, and you could do that, and those would be good cards.
Yeah, this is fixing the problem of Haunt, which I think is where the like idea of it being complicated comes from. Is that like each Haunt card did like the Haunt mechanic didn't really do anything. Each Haunt card did its own thing, which is something that like if you're designing a lot of custom Magic, it's something you tend to avoid when you're designing a mechanic. Oh, here's the mechanic, and it's just like creating a status, but then I need that status to do something. That tends to be a mechanic that people avoid.
Yeah, that's tough to make work because you just need a lot of words on the card, and every card is already wordy because it has reminder text, and then also needs an extra chunk of words. And all the Haunt cards all did different things, and there's restrictions on Haunt because it has to matter. Like it has to be something that's still good when a creature randomly dies.
Yeah,
so
it has to be good on ETB and death.
Yeah.
Oh, and then sometimes it's on an instant or sorcery, so it has to be good when you cast the thing and when the thing dies. Yeah, it's just weird.
And so some of the samples that they sent along to us, one of them is just like a hybrid, 1 and a black-white hybrid for a flying 1/1 with Departure. This is a naturally useful card. And that's maybe the strength of Departure. Maybe this is also similar to like the Chroma to Devotion switchover. Chroma is just, I care about mana symbols in some way. And Devotion is like, count the number of mana symbols and tell me what that number is. And that number is what I'm going to look at. Departure is saying, hey, we're not open-ended. You're not going to put me on spells. You're not going to do other stuff like that. you're just going to play a good creature, loan those keywords temporarily to a second creature, and then get your original creature back. And you just naturally are getting a good thing that you want to use.
So something that happens with departure is you end up departing onto the same creature over and over again, and then your opponent's just like, don't let this creature die, or I'm going to get like 3 creatures back that you're going to have to deal with.
Ooh, you clown car?
Yeah, you're going to clown car. Like this one creature's just going to have all of their ancestors watching over them, and then when that creature dies, all of its ancestors are going to come back with a vengeance.
And that thing is pacified, and you're like, ah!
And yeah, that would be the worst.
I'm forever contained.
Oh.
I guess what do you do when you have like a host, an innocent human with a host demon inside of it? You put him in like a box.
Yeah.
You seal them with a magical spell.
I think you can shorten up this a little bit. When this creature dies, exile it watching a creature you control.
This
The
is actually a
watched
card
creature.
where the like this creature, this card stuff is penalizing.
Yep.
Because it would be a lot clearer if you could just say like when Fairy Stepmother or return Fairy Stepmother to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. That would like be much easier to read. Yeah, funny. Yeah, so we got this 2-mana 1/1 flyer, and that's like a little expensive to be playing for a flyer, but you know, I'm Orzhov, maybe I'm blocking with it, maybe I'm putting an aura on it. It dies. As long as I have some other creature, I'm getting some flying. I'm attacking with that for a while. Eventually it dies. I get my stepmother back. I'm going to peck in the last 3 damage to kill my opponent, or I'm going to sacrifice it again or do whatever else. There's kind of an offensive example, which is another thing we tried to do with Haunt that we were very depressed we couldn't make work. And that's a Cursed Malign. This is black for a 2/1. It has Decayed and Departure. And the thing you got to remember with Departure says when this dies, exiling it, watching a creature. Put on your opponent's creature. Offensive Departure. That's like so natural to the flavor of Haunting that I think that almost feels like the default path for Departure. Whereas like this Fairy Stepmother, unless I'm chump blocking, sacking something else, there's not a lot of natural combat that will get my stepmother killed and will get the host creature killed and then we'll get, like that's kind of hard to set off. Whereas this Decayed stuff, these negative effects, that's just always good. If my creature died, it's because my opponent had other creatures.
One of the issues I'm seeing is the strong idea of this mechanic is that it is saying that Haunt just needs intrinsic value. It needs intrinsic meaning. Yeah. And that's that's the golden goose here. Yeah. I'm wondering if you could just make that intrinsic meaning something else of just like when this creature dies, exile it watching target creature. That creature can't block unless its controller pays 1 or something. I don't know. Like something to symbolize that creature is now spooked or being followed or being possessed or something.
Departure in this world is like, or for the first 2 cards, is like a good thing, right?
Yeah.
My predecessor died. They're giving me a benefit for a while. And then when I die, they will be released. Well, I guess that's a little sinister sounding, but it's like not ghost flavor, I guess. Or maybe it kind of is. It's what we saw in Midnight Hunt with the Disturb cards. It's not like I'm a creepy ghost. I'm messing with other people, which I think is, I don't know.
There's also a lot of value here of like, I have a creature. That creature died for some reason. It's now giving another creature I control a bonus or hurting a creature my opponent controls. And then when that creature dies, I get my creature back.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot of value. Maybe that's an overcorrection. Maybe you don't need that much value. You can just tone it back a little bit.
Yeah, this is probably as expensive as Undying. Does that feel fair? You're getting your creature again. It is delayed, but you also get something in the meantime. I guess the other kind of awkward thing about this is if you don't have another creature, all of Departure's value is gone.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you have nothing to haunt. I could Departure onto my opponent's creature with a good thing, and then when that creature dies, I get my creature back. So I have like a fallback plan. Do I ever want to do that?
I don't know. I'm getting really into the weeds.
Yeah, we're going extra deep. Yeah.
I'm very captivated with this mechanic because it is identifying the issue so clearly with haunt, which is haunt doesn't mean anything. It just means you're haunting and it changes. Give it the same meaning over and over again, and you will have fixed a major problem with the mechanic. And I think that is a nailed on. I don't know if this is the specific solution I'd go with, but I think the core nugget is really, really strong.
I think this also is a great effect to put on just 2 cards in a set.
Yeah.
Or 3 cards or whatever. I think you could get a lot of leverage out of that. All right, our second to last one here is from Bradley Rose, and it's taking Meld or Host Augment and creating a new mechanic, Weld. So Meld, that was the mechanic. We can't easily read those out loud because they're kind of a visual thing. But Meld was to take 2 cards, flip them upside down, and then they both have half a card on their backside, which you then combine into one new super card. There's like 2 angels that die into like an Eldrazi angel.
Mm-hmm. Gisela and
Bruna.
There we go.
Turn into Brizella, yeah. There's like some other, like, there's a Urza card that's double size or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So Host and Augment were like 2 mechanics that went together. So each of these are also sort of half cards, but Host can be played on their own, and they have enters the battlefield ability. When I enter, gain some life, or when I enter, draw a card, or whatever. And then Augment are these cards that are unplayable on their own. They're half cards that you can say, hey, graft me onto half of a host. And then rather than an ETB, now that is a different trigger. Like I'm looking at half orc, half blank.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning of each end step, if opponent was dealt damage this turn, blah, blah, blah. Gain some life, draw a card, put a counter on something, destroy an artifact, whatever else. You know, the augments are unplayable on their own. The hosts are playable on their own. And then you're sort of upgrading a host with an augment. And that's what Bradley's taken on with Weld.
So Weld is a keyword action that appears on double-faced artifacts whose front face have the subtype part. Any 2 parts can weld together. To weld 2 parts, put them onto the battlefield with their back faces up and assembled as a single contraption on sprocket 1, 2, or 3.
Oh, hell yeah.
When you weld them, you choose the top of one card's back face. Sorry, I didn't, in no world did I expect to be reading these words. When you weld them, you choose the top of one card's back face and the bottom, upside down end, of the other card's back face so that the result is a contraption that forms a complete sentence of rules text. Because this mechanics and its cards are so wordy, I'm avoiding sharing a second card in full. So let's say a second card's back face is heavy magnet with power generator. You could weld a contraption that's either heavy generator or power magnet. Okay, so Brad gave us the card and then the back faces to help us understand it. So the front face here is Hamster Wheel, costs 1, and it's an artifact part. When this enters, create a 1/1 red hamster creature token. At the beginning of your end step, if you both own and control this part and another part, you may exile them, then weld them onto a contraption. So Brad's kind of assuming here that we got another part, and the backside of that part is called power, for example. And so then we created this contraption that is power generator. Tim, stop me if I'm not understanding this correctly. But power says whenever you crank this contraption, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and you get an energy from generator. Oh, okay. Did you follow that?
This is a complicated mechanic. So the idea here is that we have 2 half contraptions on the back of each card, and which one to mix with the other one is the gameplay. So the front side parts seem to be just kind of value things. Make a hamster, maybe draw a card, put a counter on something. Opponent discards a card. A bunch of ETB artifacts. Maybe you could even have a couple artifact creatures in there. But the cool part is once you have 2 parts in play, you can give up on both of them to flip them and make a contraption. The contraption that you make could be different every time. Like even with two parts, you can combine them in 2 different ways and get 2 different contraptions.
Mm-hmm.
They all seem to be basically you get 2 bonuses, and which bonuses you want is what you're kind of making out of your contraption.
Maybe we should also explain how contraptions work.
Yeah, contraptions. You used to have a separate deck of contraptions, and then contraptions are basically artifacts that you don't cast; you just slam into play. Uh, that happen once every 3 turns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how you track that, all that, look that up yourself, listener.
Impressively concise interpretation of contraptions, though.
Oh, there we go. The first thing to break this down is to say why. Why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the idea here is to have more variety of contraptions and to have them integrate into your actual deck. That there was a separate contraption deck that flipped over random cards caused a lot of gameplay problems. I've played a decent
Mm-hmm.
amount of Unstable. One of the kind of awkward things about that is like you're drafting contraptions separately, you're using up draft picks to get contraptions, which contraptions are worth picking over cards. And then you have deck construction problems where like you kind of don't want to play all different contraptions and get all kinds of cool random effects. You kind of want to just play only your best contraptions. So you have a high chance of getting like your rare and mythic contraptions. Weld, I would say, tries to address that.
Yeah, it's trying to integrate it so that you are choosing your contraption, but then having to make deck building concessions in order to put them together.
Yeah, yeah.
It's closer to how traditional Magic works rather than an unset style Magic.
It's still contraptions, so we're still not quite in regular Magic,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more into regular Magic. There's no separate deck. But it seems like once you've assembled 2 parts into a contraption, you're getting 2 different buffs just once every 3 turns. So in this case, if you had 2 of these hamster wheels and you grafted them together, or you welded them together, you would have a power generator where you'd get to give a creature +1/+0 once every 3 turns, and you get an energy once every 3 turns. So I guess you're still the same timing restrictions as contraptions, but you at least pick which mixture you want. Are you not playing an energy deck? Well, don't ever making the generator side.
This is combining Meld and Host Augment to like be where Meld required you to have 2 specific cards that went together. Host Augment let you put 2 cards together as long as they had the correct type. This one is melding them to make that giant back face of a card, but is letting you mix and match so you can get different cards. So if you had another card where the backside was heavy, then you could have a heavy generator, or maybe the backside also had magnet on it. You could have power magnet, and then they would get different abilities. So
Yeah.
you can have only hamster wheels and always get power generator, or you can kind of combine different versions of cards and create new effects.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot going on with this mechanic, so it makes it a little bit hard to just like talk about off the top of our heads. But I guess one of the other things that's a little tricky about this mechanic is that you need the parts themselves to be kind of playable, like the part card that has a contraption on its back. And you also need the contraption effects to be like comprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the biggest challenge of this effect is that you have a lot of trinket rules text on the back side of cards, which I think is just going to be like a challenge physically when you're playing with the cards. As an opponent, I am going to have a very, very hard time planning around what contraptions get assembled, which I guess is roughly the same as like what I dealt with in Unstable, right? In Unstable, it's a whole
Right.
deck. I don't know what's coming out. But this information feels knowable, unlike a random deck.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like if I learned more, if I paused the game more, if I reread cards more, I could plan ahead better.
Mm-hmm.
And putting that information on the backside of a card and on the backside of commons feels like the main weakness of this effect. This is, to me, on the level of a dungeon in terms of complexity.
Yeah, except that on top of that, you could have 15 part cards in a set.
Yeah.
Each part card has 2 contraptions on it. So that's going to give you what? A lot of combinations. Somebody who's good at math can tell me how many combinations it is. On top of that, like you said, it's going to be on the back side of the card. So you're like, oh, can I see that part? And then you're like, okay, let me flip the part over and read the chalky bits on the back part of it, because the front part's a little bit more straightforward, and a ton of that text is just taken up with, you can meld these 2 cards together.
Yeah. I think there's something here where like we assemble contraptions out of pieces.
Yeah, I like that.
Something's got to get slimmed down. I'm not sure what.
I think the fun thing about this mechanic is like this theoretical potential to mix and match in the middle of a game, right? Like Magic is a game all about mixing and matching different cards to create unique effects, and this is saying like is breaking that even further down to mix and matching parts of cards to create unique effects. And so I think that is the novel, interesting thing to be doing with this mechanic.
And I think with the examples that we've gotten, we haven't actually seen that yet. Because like giving a creature an extra power is unlikely to combine in like a novel and explosive way. Maybe it's possible that it would, but I'm a little doubtful. And then getting an energy is also just like getting a currency. It's not explosive. It's just like I get 1 energy every 3 turns. Cool. That feels negative, but it doesn't feel like it's likely to say like, oh, I assembled a crazy thing. Look at this crazy thing that this object does. And hey, random stuff, change the board state, change the gameplay. All that stuff is good. All right. And then get to our last submission for this episode, our last main submission. That was from Juliet, who got it in right before we started recording. And this is to upgrade the mechanic Clash into the mechanic Debate. I'll get a quick Clash card. Clash was from Lorwyn block. This is a type of mechanic that a lot of games attempt. So one that we've got here is Retrace the Paths. This is 2 and a green for a sorcery. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a land card. Put that card into play and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Clash with an opponent. If you win, return Recross the Paths to its owner's hand. So this is like get a land off the top of your library, and then if Clash is successful, I get to cast it again later. To clash, each clashing player reveals the top card of his or her library, then puts that card on the top or bottom. A player wins if his or her card had the highest mana value. So I kind of want to have higher mana value cards in my deck. This is a good incentive to give people, but a difficult one to make successful. And then the swing here on Recross the Paths actually isn't that high. I get to cast a ramp spell again. I guess maybe that's a challenge with Clash, is that if it's swingy, that's tough. And if it's not swingy, why bother? Maybe that's the difficulty with Clash.
The actual action is memorable. But then what can you do with that action? Not really a whole lot. I think maybe like Parlay is kind of a little bit of a fix with Clash, where it's like we get to reveal the top card, something happens based off that, but it's a little bit more controlled, a little less nonsense.
And there's also this like scry afterwards, sort of. We both reveal and then we both decide where to put it back. That just adds some extra work to it, I guess. So instead, Juliet's got Debate, which seems like it might have the same flavor. Maybe I'll jump into one of these cards and then we'll talk about it. We got a pair of rares, so we're starting with the spicy ones. Heedless Thesis. This is black for a sorcery. Okay, we're not starting with commons with this one. We're going for splash. You lose 7 life and draw 7 cards. Then debate target opponent. If you win, repeat this process. Debate target opponent. Each debating player scries 1 and reveals their top card. Winning players have the highest mana value.
Right away, love how much shorter this line of text is than Clash.
Yeah, there's some new generation reminder text here where we don't have to exactly define things. We're just saying winning players. What does that mean? Winning players have highest mana value. The players don't have mana value, but we all know what this is saying. We all know what this reminder text is saying.
Also, Juliet doing the thing I love, and I know Juliet also loves this, of getting players to say fun things when they play their magic cards. So then debate target opponent is a great line of text.
This made me think of commit a crime. Whenever you commit a crime,
yeah,
which is targeting anything I own. Why don't we get another card here, and then we'll try to break this down, because so we got Prolonged Interrogation. Says 1 and a black for an enchantment. When this enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, debate target opponent. If you win, name a card. That player reveals their hand and discards all cards with that name.
Okay, so you play this on turn 2. You both reveal. You win. You get to try and Thoughtseize them, and then each successive upkeep, you're going deeper.
What's the name of card they discarded that's famous? Like,
Cabal Therapy.
yeah, you get to Cabal
Yep.
Therapy then. Thoughtseize,
Yep.
you get to look at their hand. You don't actually know what's in their hand.
Right.
So your first name is like, that's like true soul read territory.
Mm-hmm.
But then after the first part of the interrogation, which is why it's a prolonged interrogation, you start to see things about the top of their library. If they're leaving things on top, you get to name them in future turns and maybe get them to discard those things.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a fun thing to put into play, but I have no idea how good this card is.
So, just looking at the mechanic itself, the first step here is the first major change between this and Clash is you're scrying first. So you're looking at the top card and then choosing. Versus Clash, you reveal and then put on top or bottom.
Yeah, this kind of gives you two chances at a high mana value card, a little bit of game of chickeny.
Mm-hmm.
If I see like a 4-drop in the initial scry, maybe I just stand. But if I see a 1-drop or a land, then I'm going to discard it. And if I'm at 2 or 3, now I have to decide. I have to think.
Mm-hmm. The other major difference is that in this version, people tie. So it just cares about who the winner is, and 2 people can be the winner.
Yeah, both people can win a debate. Both people lose a clash.
Yeah. That's a little backwards, right? Do both people win a debate? Or does everybody
both get a good grade?
Does everybody lose? Okay.
I guess besides internet debates.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
On the internet debate.
I mean, with internet debates, both people usually think they were right after the end, so
that's
I
true.
think that's still in flavor.
And then it's us reading it that we're the losers. Okay, so which card do you want to dive into here? I guess we dived into a little bit of prolonged interrogation. Heedless Thesis is like a Grizzlebrand-esque effect. Juliet also put here, fun fact, Grizzlebrand is given the title Scourge of the Heedless Word on the card Infernal Plunge.
Wow, that is a fun fact. Scourge of the Heedless World. So he says, like, if you and all your neighbors are evil, if we're in like a Gamora situation, Gristlebrand's coming to beat the crap out of everybody.
Yeah. You're going to learn.
The demon that preys on bad people is like extra cool.
I don't know anything about Grizzlebrand, honestly.
I don't either. I got 0
He's just a constructed boogeyman. Like, I only know Grizzlebrand in the context of like, oh, that card is really scary.
He was one of the Liliana Masters, I guess, is the only lore that I know.
Right. And Liliana, I would describe as heedless, so he's on brand.
Yeah, the most famous thing he did was getting caught in the Hell Vault, and then being important enough that someone broke him out of prison.
Mm-hmm. And so on this card, you get to do the Grizzlebrand thing. Then you debate. You scry 1, which is nice for you draw the cards first. Then you scry the 1. And you try and get a high number.
This feels like it is an upgrade of Clash. This is like
the
Cascade to Discover kind of thing. Let's smooth out the gameplay a little bit. Let's make it a little clearer. Fewer feel bads, but leave the mechanic the spirit of the mechanic exactly where it was.
Do you see this and you're like, oh yes, Clash is fun now?
If you're just like, I want to like Clash, but it's a little too crappy, maybe it gets you on board.
Yeah.
If we just apply rebrand every Clash card as a debate card, do those cards suddenly become fun? I don't know.
Juliet kind of put here that their goal was like Clash should be a fun way to see a land on top of your library. And I think that is a noble idea of like, hey, if there was a mechanic that let you know there's a land on top of your library and turn that into a fun thing in the same vein as Landfall, that's kind of engaging to me as a concept. I'm not sure this version does that.
If you had like a constructed deck and there were like 3 playable debate cards, now you get to play like sort of a less broken version of Miracle, because you're still working the top of your deck, setting up cards on the top of your deck, getting the top of your deck just right, so that you can always win the debate. You could balance cards there rather than them being like unbalanced, like rather than being full Miracle mode, where they just are nutso if you manipulate and kind of random and bad if you don't manipulate. This builds in some manipulation, and these designs, yeah, they seem pretty fun.
It's for sure just like reorganizing the order, shortening the text. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure it has that last little bit of punch to be like, oh, cool. I'm just not super jazzed. So maybe it's just that the floor of Clash is so low that, like, we're still on the third floor. We have a much nicer view than we did before, but I'm just not in the penthouse yet.
All right, and we've got a couple other mechanics. I think we're going to go a little faster on these. These are extra submissions, a couple from you, one from Brad.
Mm-hmm. I'm down to just, like, dump these in the show notes or something if you want to do that.
Yeah, maybe we'll just preview them a little bit, not do a deep dive.
Okay.
So you had Banquet, which is basically Convoke or Improvise, but fully compatible with all non-lands.
Mm-hmm.
But you could tap creatures to help pay for spells. You can tap artifacts, battles, enchantments, planeswalkers, all to make your spells cheaper. It's just like a better Convoke, a better Improvise. What was your next one?
My next one was Banish, which the idea was basically a cycle from anywhere. So the innovation here is it specifies multiple zones in the reminder text. So you can pay a cost and exile it from the hand, graveyard, or battlefield to draw a card.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you can cycle from play. You can cycle from the graveyard. I usually probably want to cycle it from the graveyard if I can, but if I need to just get to a land, I can do it from somewhere else. And then your last one was Embolden. There's a twist on Outlast. Tap, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This ability costs 1 more for each counter on this creature. Activate only as a sorcery. I feel like I've read this as a different custom mechanic.
I think that's a good sign. My toxic.
Yeah, it's in the yeah. It was in like the. I don't know if it was a Commander limited set, but it was definitely a multiplayer one that I watched a couple of games of.
Yeah, my toxic trait is that I just desperately want Outlast to be fun and playable, and it just never is.
Wait, so this is Embolden. Why is this better than Outlast?
You get the first tap is free.
All Embolden cards have no activation cost.
Exactly.
Okay, so you get 1 free one, then you pay 1, then 2, then 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
First one's free.
All right.
That's about it.
And then Brad's bonus mechanic was Slow. Slow is an alternative to Decayed. I didn't mention it before, but Decayed has one other downside that people don't talk about online in all the custom spaces. And that's kind of annoying to administrate in paper if you're just at a limited game. Like, you can't just use a die. You probably don't have a punch-out token. How do you... If something is decayed but not naturally decayed, if you're making something decayed, that's a little annoying to do.
I think its best home is on tokens.
Yeah, print it into a token.
The magic of decayed is on tokens.
But we're saying, like, hey, maybe we want to hand out decayed tokens as downsides or decayed counters as downsides, blah, blah, blah. That is something to consider. Not a deal breaker.
You just do the exert thing where you pull it, or the embalm thing where you just pull it out of the sleeve a little bit.
Yeah, you do the upside down tap. Yeah. I'm not against it. Just something I forgot to mention when we were talking about it. And then Slow here. Okay, so Slow, this creature can't block creatures with haste. That's a funny twist. So Decayed, you can't block and you die right away. Souped up Decayed. Okay, so it's better Decayed, right?
Yeah.
It can block most things, but not everything. Yeah.
This feels like a playtest card in like a good way.
Yeah. I just want to gag turtle people. There's like 18 haste creatures in this format for some reason. We're powerless. All right, so that's all of our souped up mechanics. These were kind of deep dives. These are a little hard to follow verbally, so be sure to hop on beaconofcreation.com. Check out the show notes. We'll have all the images and all the text there so you can follow along the episode. You can also jump in the channel to give your own soup mechanics, whichever one's your favorite. Try to design a card or two. Show your fandom by making a card that uses Shallow Grave or Banquet or something else. But before we get out of here, I always want to tell people about our design challenge. You might have heard about this last week, but it is Finality Fancy. Design a creature that mentions a finality counter. We talked a little bit about this here, but this, finality counter is a way to say, well, this permanent leaves it exiles. And it's a new counter. It's got a lot of design uses, and we want to see what those uses are. What do you think of finality counters? You pro or con?
I'm pro finality counters, for sure.
What do you think, decayed or finality? What do you like more?
So I'm gonna go. I like finality more, but only because I find myself just leaning into decayed too hard when I'm designing a set and want my tokens to not block.
All right,
So
all right.
I'll pick finality.
Juliet's also loaded us up with bonus points this month. We've got Juniverses Within, design a Universes Beyond, and a Universes Within counterpart. So give us both names. If you want to do both renders, you could do both renders. That'd be fun. Our other bonus points, Final Fantasy. This card could be the last spell you cast in a game. So big pump spell, epic. What other ways can you convey this is a spell that's going to end a game? And then Final Fantasy, if you design, that kind of Juniverses Within thing, a double flavor card, make the cards different genres. That'll be due June 27th. What's your favorite Universes Beyond thing that you have rolling around in there? What are you trying to do? So that's about it for our episode for the week. Hop on the Discord. All the action's there. There's so many events going on in the Discord. We don't have time to highlight them all. You got anything you want to tell people about before we get out of here? Movies, anything else?
Yeah, I just ditched the. I missed the playoff game tonight, Pacers versus Knicks, Game 5.
Okay.
Just to date us a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm gonna say it now and just totally jinx it. I haven't looked at the score yet. Congrats to the Pacers for making the NBA championship. Let's go.
Alrighty.
And you can just edit that out if they lost tonight.
If you want to record both, and I'll just put in. You'll predict it either way.
Oh, okay. And I haven't looked at the score yet, but go get them Game 6, Pacers.
Alrighty. And if you need to reach either of us, Discord is a way to do that. We're also on Blue Sky. Tim F. Riley there. You're Peter for Beacon, I want to say.
Something like that.
And then we haven't formally launched it, but I've created the Beacon of Creation Blue Sky. If you want to be one of the first people ever to follow Beacon of Creation on Blue Sky, we're just going to put fun stuff on there, silly stuff, little quippy stuff. Mm-hmm. But most of all, thank you for listening.